Just thought I'd make another video. Um, I was talking before about having erections and having them as a teenager. I mean, it was, not understanding why. And, I was very ashamed of myself, particularly in my teenage years. Wetting the bed every night was difficult for me on an emotional scale more than physical. I mean, wetting the bed was simply every night for me, and um, my dad would be insultive to me about it as a child. Saying things I wish I won't have to repeat. But it so it was a shame, but it wasn't necessarily something I was too preoccupied with. It was just like a matter of, well, it just happened. And the other thing that sort of felt like was okay was the fact that I knew that other kids had bedwetting, but it wasn't obviously like every night. But to me, it was at least that I wasn't like someone who had. Um, it wasn't nothing. It wasn't. It wasn't something that um, I never heard anyone else struggle with. So in some way, I felt like, I didn't feel as weird. But then in my teenage years, as it started to become more noticeable with people from school, then sort of to the shame of myself and doing it became more apparent. And when I started getting erections when I was like 13 and 14, and they became noticeable, and it was another part of me that I had no control of. Like, I had no control of wetting the bed, and that was frustrating to me, and it was a shame to me, and I didn't want it to be something that my family would be always looking down on me, saying, Paul, Paul is this, Paul is this, and judging me and criticizing me. Whereas erections were another thing that I had no control over, and it was when people would see me having an erection, they would laugh. And it was similar to the wetting the bed scenario, where people found out, they would laugh and they would mock me behind my back, and it was amusing. And I mean, it was difficult. I hated myself to the point where I would hurt myself. And then I have scars. I have areas of my body that are still damaged, you know, 25 years later from where I used to hurt myself. Because I was so ashamed of myself, and because I had no one to, I remember, like, I was living with my father in Twitter, and, you know, it wasn't even my father. I mean, like, when I lived with my mother and my sister and my brother and Alice Springs, I still wet the bed. And Ruth and Steve were particularly non-supportive. They would have said many times, "We don't understand why you keep doing it," as if it's a choice, as if I was particularly wanting to do that. And it's hard. Like, Stephen was particularly emotionally um, cruel to me in many ways, and it was difficult. So my mother was the least critical of me, and she's used to just do the majority of the cleaning. I mean, it was washed my sheets every day, and it was a miracle that I had stopped. I took some trial medication that I had no real faith that it would work, and if it did, it would help me temporarily, but I would still suffer from it. I didn't think that it would go completely where I wouldn't have an issue with it at all. It was so surprised me and my family. Someone who wet the bed for 21 years of their life, and all of a sudden stopped. Uh, 21 years where I wet the bed every night, and I couldn't remember a night that I didn't. So all of a sudden, and like, my parents just thought I would grow out of it. They didn't seek medical advice for it. I mean, I did go see like a what's it called? There was a mental facility. And I went there and I talked to the person about my problems. I can't even remember what I said, but I would have mentioned bedwetting. Sure, I'm sure. And I remember they would have said, um, they they would have said something to my mother about Paul needs to come in. He's got obviously some major mental, physical, mental issues. He needs to be a resident. He needs to come in, and I think that would have been the worst thing for me, because I was really like, it's hard to describe how I felt. Like I was really lost. I was really empty. I think if I had been committed into a place like that and just fed um, prescribed antidepressants or prescribed or whatever it was that they thought might have helped me, I think my life would have sort of ended. I mean, I would have committed suicide. I would have had no life. I mean, when I stopped wetting the bed, it was a miracle for me. It was a chance for me to be able to say, hey, I can now live. I can now move out of home. I don't have to be ashamed of this anymore. And it was great. It was a wonderful, freeing thing for me, a blessing thing. I mean, I had the procedure which damaged my urethra after, which really was extremely difficult, and it's still damaged to this day. So that's hard to do with. But and I look back and I remember there was a teacher that I had in high school at Canberra Area School. His name was John Balnays. He was a very I suppose you could say intellectual teacher. I mean he remember he asking me about what's going on in my life, and I remember he was the first teacher person to take an interest in what was happening with me, and I remember him calling my father on the phone as well one time when I was hurting myself really badly, and I know he was concerned over me. He was that was nice that a teacher was concerned over me. I mean, I don't know what he could have done. I mean, he was just concerned. He knew like I was a recluse. I didn't have any friends. It was difficult for me. I had been bullied when I was in year 8 and year 9 pretty heavily, which was difficult. But yeah, it was difficult for me to make friends. It was hard. I mean, yeah, and yeah, what can I say? I mean, when I look back and I think, my life could have ended my life when I was in my teenage years. I mean, that would have I would have never had any children. I would have never known the joy of being with a woman. I would have never had those experiences. So I'm glad that I didn't do that. Um, Children, even though like I haven't been part of my children's life much, it's still a blessing to have children, and to be a father. So, um, yeah.